Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're well. Today is Wednesday. It is the 20th of May, and we are getting ready for Shavuos. This Shabbos will be a difference between Israel and outside of Israel, whereas everyone outside of Israel, it'll be the second day of Shavuos. So our laning will be for Shavuos. But in Israel, since Shavuos is only one day, Shabbos this year will be a regular Shabbos, so they'll be reading Parshas Naso. So this is going to be one of those years where the laning gets skewed, that in Israel they're going to be one Parsha ahead of us until we have a chance to catch up when we have one of the double Parshios that will lane two, and in Israel they'll just lane one. So for those who are joining us from Israel, even though you'll have a different laning this Shabbos, nonetheless, what I'm going to share this morning is from Megillas Rus, so therefore, it'll be relevant to everybody because we're all going to celebrate Shavuos and on the same day, and that'll be on Friday. That's when we'll read Megillas Rus. I want to share with you today two things, two items from Megillas Rus. The first is something that I found the other year, a very unexpected place. So let's see where it is. So it's in the Shulchan Aruch, where the laws of Pesach, when he's discussing matzah. And one of the commentaries there brought something down, offering a commentary on Megillas Rus. It was just so surprising. It's not at all where I expected to see this. Let's just see for context what's going on. It's in the laws of matzah, and the Shulchan Aruch is discussing, okay, we all know in an optimal world where someone has boxes and boxes of matzah, how do you distribute it to have so much at this part of the Seder, so much at this part of the Seder? Fine. Now, what if you only have one kezias and you've got to have enough matzah to make it through motzi matzah and then korech and afikoman? What do you do then? That's what the Shulchan Aruch was discussing. In the middle of that, let's see the second paragraph there, which says the Sharei Tshuva. The Sharei Tshuva is one of the commentaries, classical commentaries to the Shulchan Aruch. Second paragraph on the first page, Sharei Tshuva. So this is one of the classical commentaries to the Shulchan Aruch. So he writes as follows. Well, he says, Maror, he says, okay, Ayin Ber Hetev, look in the Ber Hetev, look in the Sheil Sechuvas, look in the responsa sefer called Beis Yehuda. And here's the following question that's dealt with there. Shnaim Shoyu Bebeisa Asurim. There are two Jews who have been locked up in prison. Again, this doesn't mean that they were criminals. They could have been taken captive and they find themselves confined. You have two Jews who are in prison, or b'midbar, or they're in a wilderness. V'lonin salam ela kazayis matzah b'tzimtzum. And there's one exact kazayis of matzah. So the question is, mikodem, who has priority to this? Meaning what? This is similar to the case of where, okay, there's one canteen of water. It's enough to get them through, but there's a question of life and death. If they share the water, they're both going to die. If one person has it, then he'll live, another will die. That's that question we're familiar with. This is a different question. They have no shortage of water. The question is, they have a shortage of matzah. They have one kezias of matzah. And if they split it, neither of them are going to fulfill their obligation for having matzah on Pesach. So the question is, who has priority to have that matzah? Interesting question that they're dealing with. Visayim, and he concludes over there that kol talei bechol da'alim gavar, that we bring out the Talmudic principle of kol da'alim gavar, which basically means the strong to the might goes the right. They have an arm wrestling match, and whoever wins the arm wrestling match gets the matzah. Because otherwise, how do you figure it out? If they split it, neither's going to fulfill the mitzvah. And how do you figure out who's basically the strongest person gets the matzah? That's what that source concludes. V'lo nehira. But he says, but that doesn't make sense. To b'chai gavna havale matzah gezula. But then that would be considered stolen matzah. In other words, if they fought it out to, let's say, or who can push and shove to get the matzah, whoever wins ends up with stolen matzah. Rafilu einbo shava pruta. Even if, let's say, you're going to say it doesn't have the value of a pruta, mikol makom albino lachem b'matzah. We need lachem. There's the same way when it comes to lulav and esrog. It has to be lachem. We have to own it. We can't have a lulav gezula, stolen lulav. I also can't have stolen matzah. So how can you tell me the way to figure this out when if there's this precise amount of matzah kazayas, and then that question, that source that dealt with this question was the Beis Yehuda. He says, okay, kol dalam gavar, the strongest person wins. But then the strongest person ended up with stolen matzah. So he ends up saying, I don't understand this. So comes along the Sharei Tshuva, the next paragraph. Bamnam Yoser Nira. So he says, I don't think it's such a question. Because I'll tell you, this was the case that the Beis Yehuda was dealing with. The Beis Yehuda Marisha Kazai Shal Matzah Shal Hefker. It wasn't owned by one of. No, you're right. If one of the prisoners already had a kazayis matzah, for someone to steal that matzah from him, that would be theft, and that would be matzah gezula. But let's say the captors toss into the cell a kazayas of matzah. No one owns that. So now it's okay. The quickest one to get it will be the one to get it. He says that's what he was dealing with. He goes, Shekazai shal matzah shal hefker was ownerless. Vein l'shum echad mehem zechuspo. Neither of them had rights in it. V'chahai gavna, and in such a case, I'm sorry, it should be chahai gavna, and in such a case, Nira Pashat Shemisha B'Yadol Zakos Yiska. In a case like that where it was ownerless, you have an opportunity to get a mitzvah. Neither person has rights to that mitzvah. So whoever races to get there first, whoever could, body check the other one and get the matzah, they win. Same thing when it comes to, let's say, he says, I'll make a kavachomer. I'll make a logical extension from a case of, let's say, two people are walking and they see an ownerless watch. So no one has a right to that watch. No one has, so whoever gets there first owns that watch. If that's true when it comes to something of monetary value, so he says, so too, certainly that would come to a mitzvah. He says this comes up in the Gemara in Bab Metzia. It says, oh, fine. All right. Now let's see the next paragraph. This is where we get to Megillas Rus. This just shocked me seeing this. Okay, so here's this discussion, theoretical discussion going on about matzah, two guys in prison. Okay. The Kamokain, the Kakasav rather, the Igera Shmuel. He says, believe it or not, I saw the same idea that if mitzvahs are ownerless, no one had a right to this mitzvah, it was an ownerless mitzvah, then it's a race between the two parties who can get the mitzvah first, and you could even deceive the other party, do whatever it takes to get that mitzvah. He says, look what he says. The Kach Kasav, rather, Igera Shmuel. There's an early commentator to Megillas Rus that was by the name of Igera Shmuel al Rus. The Masha Kasov, at the end of the Megillah, if you look, and I have the pasuk there, and I highlighted the key points. So let's pause. We'll come back to this paragraph. Let's look at the pasuk. Let's just remember what's going on in Megillas Rus. Rus has Moabite background, and she comes into Israel absolutely broke and destitute with her mother Naomi. And they come into Israel and they're broke and they're having to gather and collect shikha and peah, all the parts of the field that are left for paupers in Israel by Torah law. That's what they're having to do. It ends up in God's incredible scheming and designing of laws of the universe. The field they happen to go into is Boaz's field, and that's the field where she builds up a relationship with Boaz, who is a distant relative of her dead husband and that family. And finally, she's approaching saying, can you marry me? Take me in. She's being quite assertive, Rus, saying, can you take care of me? I'm destitute. I need to take care of myself and my mother-in-law. And finally, Boaz says, yeah, I just need to take care of something first. He checks in Perek Dalet, he checks in, there's a relative slightly closer than he is. And he tells this relative, listen, you all know the story. You had this relative Elimelech. He had his two children, Machlon and Chilion. They went off to Moab. They passed away. Nami is back. Rus is back. Rus wants to get remarried. And I'm giving you the right of refusal since you're a closer relative than I am. Do you want to marry her? But look what he says here. Vayomer Boaz. Boaz tells this relative, who again, we don't know his name. The Megillah refers to him as Ploni Almoni, which is like John Doe, says, Vayomer Boaz, B'yom kinoscha sada miyad Naomi. If you do go through with this, yes, you will acquire the fields that Naomi technically owns from her deceased husband Elimelech and the kids, Machlon and Chilion. At the same time, also, Meis Rus HaMoaviyah. But it's a package deal. You're also going to have to marry Rus, the Moaviyah. Oh, by the way, she's got a Moabite background. Eshes Hames Kanisa, she's the wife of the deceased. You'll acquire the field. You'll also marry Rus. Lakim Shema Meis Al Nachlaso. And by marrying her, you'll reestablish that family line. That's what Boaz throws in. Why did he throw in that word Hamoaviyah? Why did he throw that in?
Sure, he knows she's Moabite now.
But what's he hoping to accomplish there? Exactly. He's basically saying, I want to marry her. I want this mitzvah. This is like the case of the matzah. There's one kazayas of matzah thrown down. It's hefker. It's not his. I'm allowed to do whatever it takes to get that mitzvah. So he's bringing a raya, he's bringing a proof to this from look what Boaz did here. Boaz, in a certain sense here, he's playing hardball with this relative because he really wants to marry Rus. Look what he says here. Kach kasav biger Shmuel al Rus. B'masha kasav Boaz l'goal. When Boaz says to that closer relative, B'yom kanoscha miyad Rus ha-Moaviyah, he says it's a package deal. If you want that field, but you've got to marry Rus the Moaviyah. Why did he throw in that word Moaviyah? Lefisha tziba baruch hakodesh. Boaz had a glint, he had a shimmer of divine inspiration. Shasid latzeis michalatzeh shalshelas malchus, Beis David. He had a flash of divine inspiration that out of Rus is going to come, the descendants of Rus, that's going to be the long-awaited Malchus Beis David is going to come from her. Lakach Amar, and he wants to be part of that. So therefore, when he's dealing with that Goel Lakach Amar, that's why he said Moaviyah. He made sure to emphasize, oh, by the way, you got to marry this almana, you got to marry this widow. Oh, and you know about her background, right? She's a Moaviyah. Kedei sheyima'einu. This was all a clever plot on Boaz's part. He was wording it in such a way that would cause him to say yima'en, that he would refuse. That this closer relative would say, I don't want to get involved there. I'm nervous about that Moabite background, and we're going to have offspring together. They're going to have a hard time finding shidduch. I don't want to do that. So he intentionally, when he was saying the deal, threw in a movie as a way to discourage this closer relative from jumping in. Why? Because he wants the deal, because he had a flash of inspiration. Malchus Beis David is coming from her. V'ikachenahu, he wants to marry her. V'yizkel shalshalos gedolahi, and that way he will merit having that incredible dynasty come from him. V'yavta asur l'ramos chavero l'kachas shelo. Even though I'm never allowed to deceive my friend to take what's his, I can't go over to my friend and say, "Oh man, you bought that car? I can't believe you bought that car. Everyone knows that's a lemon. Why don't you just sell it to me for $50? I'll get it off your hand." I can't do that to a friend. I am not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to deceive my friend to take something which is already his. That's when it comes to monetary matters. When it comes to mitzvos, when it comes to a mitzvah, even though I am not allowed to steal a mitzvah from someone who has rights to that mitzvah, could go on kisrei, let's say kisrei adam, a shochet just shechted a chicken, and I come by and I say, whoa, mitzvah opportunity, I could throw dirt, I could throw sand on that blood. He has first rights to that. He just shechted that chicken. I can ask him, hey, you do kisei adam all the time. I never have an opportunity to do that. Can I do that mitzvah and make the bracha? I have to ask. If he says yes, I can go ahead and do it, but I'm not allowed to steal it from him. I'm not allowed to just walk by with a handful of dirt and say, oh, bracha kisei adam, and throw it down and steal his mitzvah. I'm not allowed to do that. Umila, same thing. Let's say a mole is about to perform a mila on a kid, and I want to do the mitzvah. So I, boom, run in and I shove him and grab his tools and give him I'm not allowed to do that. Kiyotze, however, mikomakom kol shelo zacha adayin. If someone does not have a right to a particular mitzvah, him kimidbar hamufkar lakol. That's like a wilderness where it's absolutely ownerless, and everybody who wants could get it. V'chol adam nitztav Hashem es nafsho. Every Jew, we are all commanded to make our neshamas grow to the greatest potential they can possibly be. There's only one way to feed our neshamas. It's with mitzvahs. So that's what Boaz was doing here. The concept is, when it comes to mitzvahs, you're right. If someone has a right to that mitzvah, so to say, they've acquired that mitzvah, I'm not allowed to steal it from them. But if something is ownerless, it's a mitzvah that's just waiting out there for someone to chop it, I want to jump in and get it because I want to feed my neshama. L'zakos b'mitzvos. In Yaakov Avinu Alasham. That's exactly what Yaakov did by Bechorah. That when he convinced Esav to sell him the Bechorah. Ubebrachos. That's also what he did when he deceived, together with his mother, deceived Yitzchak to get the brachos. Lefi Shera, because he saw with divine inspiration, and Rivka saw too, V'yada she'Esav hismaker la'asos hara, that Esav was going down a dark path. But Yaakov wanted this stuff to complete his soul, so it was okay for him. So this is what he's saying. This is how to explain that case that the Shulchan Aruch and the Beis Yehuda were referring to. The case where two Jews are in jail, and the captor throws in a kazayas of matzah, and now who gets it? Whoever whoever could outsmart the other, whoever could run faster than the other. Why? Because it was ownerless. That's a chance to do a mitzvah. To get a mitzvah, I'm allowed to outsmart or overpower another person because, again, he didn't have rights to it. If he had rights to it, if it was his matzah, if I take it, that's gezel, that's theft. But if it wasn't his, it was hefker, then whatever I could do to get I've got to chop the mitzvah. Again, if we really view it that we're here in this world for a limited amount of time, it's like a shopping spree. I remember when I was a kid, I used to salivate when I would see these. It was such a thing, like you'd see at these like carnivals every now and then. One of the prizes would be you'd get a shopping spree at Toys R Us, and basically you could fill your shopping cart, or they would give you 10 minutes to fill whatever it would be. And I just remember thinking, like, I can't imagine anything in this world that could be more pleasurable than that. Like having a shopping cart and running around Toys R Us. Like, how do I get to the GI Joe section, the Star Wars section, get all my stuff, everything I need, get it in there, and then like fill that and then making plans. Okay, well, if it's down to this and this, what would I get? I'm making all these little plans in my little mind about what I would do on a shopping spree. But that's what we view. That's it. That's it.
Kroger.
What?
They had auction.
They did fill a shopping cart?
Kroger, you had like.
That's awesome. It's been so long since I've seen that though. But there's something. Yep.
Yeah.
But it's been so long since I've seen anything like that being given away or raffled off. I think those are incredible. But that's how our commentators say. That's how we view our time in this world. Hashem is the stopwatch is ticking, and we're here to fill our shopping cart. Everything I could get in there. And mitzvahs, there's only one thing I could do to feed my neshama, and that's mitzvahs. So again, I'm not allowed to steal mitzvahs from someone. But if the stuff that's out there is no one's got dibs on it, then absolutely I'm allowed to outrun, outsmart, do whatever it takes to get that mitzvah. And that's what it matters. And he says, what's his proof to that? What the Gerash Shmuel says, this was Boaz's tactic as he's speaking to the Goel at the end of Megillas Rus. But what this really does is give us a perspective on how we should be maximizing the opportunities. We don't have to be running and body checking anybody to get that matzah. Thank God we're not in that situation. But there are mitzvah opportunities all around us, and we have to ask ourselves, am I grabbing them? Because they're all around us to get. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
This happens all the time. Let's say a friend who doesn't drive, and
Ooh.
a friend who doesn't
Yeah.
drive. Two friends that said, "Yeah, I need a ride to the doctor tomorrow."
Okay.
And me and another person both say, and we both say, "We can take you."
Yeah.
Now, is it then? Am I supposed to? I always thought I should. Well, she wants to take her, let her get the mitzvah, but I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't sit for that.
But again, you got to know what works for your schedule and what doesn't.
Yeah,
But this is a mitzvah from what they're saying here, the Gerash Shmuel and the Beis Yehuda. What they're saying is, yeah, I want to view it as a shopping spree. This is an opportunity to put something in my cart. I want to feed my neshama. That's what it sounds to say. Yeah, but you have to know if that's healthy for you. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed. I've got other stuff on my schedule. I can't do this. So I would like the other person to do that. But if my schedule is open, then that's an opportunity. Yeah, you could do that. You could say, thanks for the opportunity. There we go. Now, I want to share with you on page 2. I came upon this in a sefer the other year when I was recovering with my broken leg. So that year, one of the parents of a student in school reached out, and it was very nice of her. It was a mom. It reached out and said, "We know you're home and you're basically laying on your back for a while. Is there a sefer that you'd like, And I said, that's so thoughtful, rather than watching YouTube videos all day long, that's so thoughtful. And I said, you know what? In fact, there is a sefer that had just come out, and it was a Sheils L'Tshuvos Divrei Chachamim. I know the author, and what he did, long story short, this was someone that had spent a good considerable chunk of time when he was younger. He had a number of different halachic questions, and he would go around to different rabbanim, to different poskim, and ask. And it was very interesting. He would say, like, I remember to Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rav Scheinberg. He would go to and get their answers to the same question. And what he did when he republished it was he added a lot more material, and he also added a lot of footnotes that had great material. He also added a lot of notes. We all know Naftali Naiman here. Naftali Naiman's father was Rabbi Shmuel Naiman, was for many years was a mashkiach and Rebbe in Yeshiva Chafetz Chaim, close to 50 years. He had incredible amount of notebooks of stuff like this. So he had gotten some of the notes, and he had incorporated some of that into here as well. So when I was going through this, it was 2 years ago, I came upon this, and this was pages 675 and 76. This is exactly this concept. Let's look at the top of the page here. It's called Chotfin LaMitzvos, which means grabbing, hopping mitzvos. So he says, this is this Rabbi Ginsburg. He lives in Cedarhurst. So he's writing this. Hayisi Pam There was once a time, Eid Raya. I witnessed this with my own eyes. The base Midrasho Shel Agon at Tzaddik Rav Aryeh Levin. Rav Aryeh Levin, the great tzaddik of Yerushalayim. So after he passed away, his family he had a very, very small yeshiva that was it's near Machne Yehuda. I think we call that neighborhood, is that Nachalot, that area that's right by Machne? So I think that's the name of the area there. So as I remember davening there once when I was in yeshiva, they got a request that they still were keeping a small minyan there and they needed some they didn't know they were going to have a minyan for Rosh Hashanah. They wanted to know could they send like 3 or 4 boys. So I remember going there, and again, I was too young. I was 18 years old, so I was too young to really understand who was in the. These were some of Rav Aryeh Levine's children who were still running this base medrash. It was absolutely wild. So here Rabbi Ginsburg says, I witnessed something myself in the base medrash of Rav Aryeh Levin. Talmid muflag echad. There was one really big Talmud Chacham there. Come mincha b'Shabbos. So he said he's there davening Shabbos mincha, and at Shabbos mincha they take out a sefer Torah. They have 3 aliyahs. They read the first aliyah for the coming week, and there's 3 short aliyahs. So he says they bring out the Torah, and normally the Gabbai calls up Yamod for Cohen, Yamod for Levi, Yamod for Yisrael. The Gabbai calls the name. He says, what did I personally witness? I saw a guy who was a real Talmud Chacham. He wasn't a bore. I saw a real Talmud Chacham come to mincha b'Shabbos. He got up during mincha Shabbos. V'lo chika likras hagabay l'aliyah shlishi. They're up to shlishi, which Yisrael gets on aliyah for. He didn't wait for the gabbai to decide who in the room he's going to choose. This guy just ran right up to the Torah and started making the brachos. He gave himself the aliyah. He says, I saw a guy do this. He says, I was shocked. What is that? The kara lechavero. And the Karol Chavera. Oh, I'm sorry. He says this guy ran up there by Shlishi. He didn't call himself the Karol Chavero Shafhu Tamar Chacham Gadol Shlishi. So this guy, let's say Ruvain ran up. He ignored the Gabbai. Ruvain ran up and wanted his friend Shimon, who's also a big Talmud Chacham, to get the Aliyah. So he basically ran up, took the place of the Gabbai, and says Yamod Shimon Ben Yaakov for Shlishi. And he's like, what just happened? There was a gabbai, and he just like ran up to give his buddy the aliyah. What is that? The gabbai was shocked. The tzibor, everyone was shocked. Hechriz, the guy who did it, made an announcement. Chotfen lemitzvahs. You're allowed to chop mitzvahs. You're allowed to, this was not owned by anybody, this mitzvah. I guess he knew there was no one at a yurt site, whatever it was. He knew there was no, and it was a hefker. And he says, Chotfen lemitzvahs. You're allowed to chop a mitzvah. And that's what I did. The same way that again, someone could grab the matzah, he says the same way, this was an aliyah, and I grabbed it for my friend who's a Talmud Chacham. Vagon Reb Eliezer Plachinsky. So Reb Eliezer Plachinsky was still living at this time, and Rav Lezer Plachinsky was a son-in-law of Rav Aryeh Levin, so he was running the base medrash during this time. And he was a big Talmud Chacham, a huge Talmud Chacham in his own right. So Rav Lezer Plachinsky was there, and who was Rav Lezer Plachinsky? Well, he was one of Rav Aryeh Levin's son-in-laws. You know who had as another son-in-law was Rav Elyashiv. So he says, in case you don't know who Rav Lezer Plachinsky was, Giso, he was a brother-in-law of Agon Rav Yosef Shalom Elyashiv. So he says Rav Plachinsky, who was running the base medrash, who was a brother-in-law of Rav Yashiv, he was also present. Hayanochach b'makom, he was there too at that minyan. V'hiskimimo, and he nodded. He says, "Yeah, I guess that was okay. That guy's got a point." When he says quote from the mitzvahs, he chapped a mitzvah like this. He says, "No one had ever seen anyone behave this way before." But he goes, "There's a Lazer Plachinsky." He says, "Yeah, but I guess that makes sense." That's his incident.
Whoever gets the name first.
So I think we'd have chaos.
Kind of sticky.
Yeah, and it would also be chaos. So you have to understand, first of all, this minyan, again, I davened there only once. It was this Rosh Hashanah when they were telling us that they needed people. It wasn't like a big, robust crowd. It sounds like this was a very small group of people where everyone knew each other. So that's what it sounds like you could get away with something like that there. You try to do this in shul, it's going to cause machlokas. It's going to cause chaos. Not a good idea. But he's just bringing this down, is that I witnessed this. Now look what he says in the footnote here. So let's look at that footnote I and Vav. So this is Rabbi Ginsburg's talking. He goes, L'fnei Shanu Rabos, many years ago, I was at a wedding. I was sitting at a table or at the chuppah waiting for things to start with Rav Nosson Wachtfogel, who was the mashkiach for many years in Lakewood. See, party law myself. I told him over this story about what I personally witnessed at that mincha minyan at the base medrash of Rav Aryeh Levin or Lazer Plachinsky, the whole thing. Gam evesi lo raya. And he goes, and I even brought a proof to it. From where? Megillas Shmuel al Rus. This is how he got. I was so amazed when I saw this footnote. I was like, I can't believe it. I also know about this Megillas Shmuel. I'm so amazed that that's what he pulled in. That's exactly what I was thinking when he saw this. So he says al Rus shehuva b'shari tshuva. It's brought down in shari tshuva. Orus Gemara. It's going on the Gemara. Shechayecha Kodman. The Gemara talked about that if there's two guys with a canteen of water in the wilderness, we say your life comes first. And he says, Bamasha Amar, here's what the Gerish Shmuel says. Bamasha Amar Boaz Lagoel. When he said to Boaz said to the other redeemer, Bayom Karoska Miyad Rus HaMoaviyah, on the day that you acquire the field, you've also got to marry Rus HaMoaviyah. Why did he say Moaviyah? Lefisha Tzipa Baruch HaKodesh. He saw with divine inspiration, Shasu Latzis Mechalatzeh, Shal Shalos Malchus Beis David, that the dynasty of David Malchus is going to come out of Rus. L'kach Amar HaMoaviyah, that's why he said Moaviyah, Kidei Shiyima'ein Hu. He wanted the other guy to back off, to get frightened off, and that way Boaz could marry her. And this is a quote, what we just saw, even though normally I'm not allowed to steal, to deceive someone to steal their stuff. When it comes to mitzvah that was ownerless, that no one had a right to, I'm allowed to do that. Why? Because I say, Chayecha Kodman, I got to feed my neshama, and this comes first. Okay, that's our Igerish Shmuel. So he quotes that Igerish Shmuel. This is Pshat. What happened there by that story I saw in the Beis Medrash. And now he adds one thing. He goes, when I was talking this over, this is just so fascinating. It's like you're a fly on the wall. He says, I'm talking this over with Rav Nosson Wachvogel at this wedding. I guess we're waiting for the chuppah to start. So I'm sitting next to him. I'm telling this. Next paragraph. And I also mentioned to Mashgiach, Tzur. I gave him, here he says, imagine the following example. Shani holech, and this might get to your case, Joanne. Shani holech berachov yachad im adam acher. I'm taking a stroll. I'm walking with another person on the street, and I see there's an opportunity to do chesed. I want that. I want that opportunity. I want to feed my neshama. I want the chesed. And I'm nervous that maybe my friend's going to chop it first, because if he sees it, in other words, he was looking over there, but he didn't see there's the little old lady who needs help crossing the road. I saw her, but I don't want him to get to the little old lady first. I know he's a quicker runner than I am. So he says, therefore, what did I do? Ani Omer lo, I say to my friend, Oi, I need some ma'od. I'm so thirsty. Hey, any chance you could run into that store? Buy me a bottle of water. I'll wait right here. I'm not really thirsty. I want to walk that little old lady across the street, but I'm fooling him to run in there to buy the water, so I'll get the mitzvah. While he's in this store getting me the water, and he runs chesed. I run to do that chesed. I run to help her across the street. And so he's saying that's an example of this. And would I be correct in saying this is what the Gerish Shmuel would say is okay? The mashkiach says absolutely. That's a very good illustration. It would be okay. So it's not just okay in your case. It's not just okay to say to the person who needs the ride, no, I'd like to do it. You're even allowed to deceive that other person and say, I'm going to be in that part of the neighborhood anyhow, so let me do that. Why? Because I didn't have a right to this. She didn't have a right to this mitzvah. They don't have. I want the mitzvah because I want to feed my neshama. So I'm allowed to employ some means of deception to chop that mitzvah. He says that's what the Gerish Shmuel, that would be an application of this. So that's what he says. Now look what he says on top of the next column. The Yadua, it's well known, Shagon Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer, Asa Davar Ke'enze, Binyan Shidduch Shel Rav Aaron Kotler, V'dai Lamevin. He says it was well known in yeshiva circles that Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer did something like this to basically steal Rav Aaron Kotler and to get him as a son-in-law. And he goes, people know what I'm talking about. I did not know what he was talking about, so I reached out to him. And I said, what's the story there that you're saying? I didn't get the whole details from him. I think he told me where I can look it up and see it in a book. It basically sounds like when Rav Aaron Kotler was a young man studying in the Slobodka Yeshiva in Lithuania, a lot of people had their eyes on him, because he was this absolute genius that they, as an eligible son-in-law, as a potential son-in-law. And it seems like that Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer knew that people were about to pounce, so he proceeded somehow or another. He ran in there and not just chapped him, but employed some means of deception to chap him. I don't know what the story was, but he's saying that this is what happened. He secured him as a son-in-law. I don't know what exactly happened there. I don't have all the details, but he says apparently this is a well-known story. I'd have to ask ask someone who's really holding in the Cutler family lore to get what this was. Okay, that is the story there. I thought that was just absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's go to another Dvar Torah. This is unrelated to the first, but I think again with that first, what that really just reminds us is that mitzvahs are opportunities. They're not burdens, they're opportunities. It's the only way to feed our neshama. And the same way we would view a shopping spree as like, how am I going to run to get one more item in the shopping cart? That's how we're viewing our life here is temporary in the big scheme of things, and we want to see what can I do to get this? I'm never allowed to steal from another person. I'm never allowed to grab someone's mitzvah if they had first rights to it. But if it was an ownerless mitzvah, I'm allowed to do anything I can to get that because I got to feed my neshama. Again, it just reminds us of the perspective of things, what a mitzvah is. Now, this next Dvar Torah I want to share with you, I thought was beautiful. Again, this is from Rav Pam. Rav Avram Yaakov HaKohen Pam was a Rosh Yeshiva for many years in Torah Vodaas in Brooklyn. My father-in-law, Zichrono Livracha, was he considered him to be his Rabbi. He was in his shir for a number of years. My father-in-law would love to say over any stories about Rav Pam and Divrei Torah from Rav Pam. He would smile. He would just break out a smile. He would just shine when he spoke about Rav Pam. That really says a lot about his the impression he made on him. He was also just a real tzaddik, such a person that everyone viewed as being just a really, really righteous person. So a number of years ago, I think it was soon after Rav Pam passed away, so one of his Talmidim at Torah Vodaas, Rav Shalom Smith, he put out a number of Sfarim that were based on Rav Pam's Divrei Torah. Here's one that was in English. It was called Rav Pam on the festivals, on the Yom Tovim. So here's something that he has on Megillas Rus I wanted to share with you. I thought this is very nice because I think this is $1 million question in Rus. I know that I've grappled with this for many years, and I finally saw a sefer a couple years ago that dealt with this, but I never really plumbed the depths of it. It's kind of a catch-22, and you'll see how he sets it up. Machlon and Chilion, those are the two sons of Elimelech. These were not custodians. This was a very respectable family in Yehuda. What? Yeah, they were a family of chashuvim. This was a very family. Elimelech was a very chashuv member in the base Yehuda, in the family of Yehuda. His two kids were chashuv, and it says they leave to go to stay Moav, and his two sons marry Moabite women there. And what does that mean? They married Moabite women. Did they really marry Nachrios? Did they marry a Goya, a woman who weren't Jewish? That's really hard to understand. That here is this illustrious family, and what? And Elimelech and Nami were okay with that. Like she obviously has a good relationship with them, so that's really hard. But if you're going to tell me, no, 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 they converted first, so then how do we understand? It's a catch-22. Then how do you understand Nami on their way back to Israel is trying to convince them to stay back? If they're part of the Jewish people now, you're coming with me. You can't stay back here. There's no Jewish community here. You're coming with me to Israel. And she even convinces Arpa to stay back. So it's like darned if you do, darned if you don't. Which one is it? So this is a question that has bothered many of the Mefarshim. A couple of years ago, I bought a sefer on Megillas Rus, and it had a perush, it had a commentary from the Bach. The Bach was one of it's an acronym for Bayis Chadash, was a commentary to Shulchan Aruch and to the Torah Shulchan Aruch, and he has a commentary, it's called Meshiv Nefesh. That's what the commentary was called. And I saw that he dealt with this a little bit. It was a very long piece. I didn't make it through the whole piece, but then when I saw this from Rav Pam, he quotes the Meshiv Nefesh, and you'll see what he does. He gives us a very good way to understand this aspect of Megillas Rus that I think is it's a conundrum, right? Because either way you go, yeah, so I think you'll see this Meshiv Nefesh rather, that from the Bach helps us do this, and you'll see what Rav Pam does with this. It says many of the guidelines of accepted Gerim, converts to Judaism, are based on Megillas Rus and the manner whereby Rus was brought into the fold through her mother-in-law Nami. Many commentators discuss the question of Rus's halachic status at the time of her return from the fields of Moab to Bethlehem, Beit Lechem. He gives you there where you can look to find some. And he's the footnote there. If she had already converted to Judaism before her marriage to Machlon, why was there a need to go through the conversion process again? Right? If she did already convert, then why did she have to convert again? Why is this the source In other words, in the Gemara, for much of the halachas of Gerus come from it. Well, she already converted. So what do you mean returning to Israel? We're going to analyze, well, what conversations did she have with Nami? She already converted. This isn't the time she's converting. That's question number one. Why was there need? Why it seems like she's got to go through another conversion? And why did Nami attempt to discourage her from returning to Beit Lechem? In other words, she's also trying to discourage. If she already converted, you can't leave her behind. There's a Jewish woman now. You can't leave her behind. If she was not converted earlier, this is another issue comes up. If she was not converted earlier, then she had the status of a Gentile. Okay, let's play that out. If she was a Gentile, if so, why was there a need to perform Yibum, any sort of malevolent marriage through Boaz or some other member of the dead husband's family? She wasn't a Jew when she was married. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so it's like this massive conundrum. If you're going to tell me she wasn't Jewish and now she's converting for the first time, you got a load of problems on your hand. Number one, you got this family of Chashuvim that's marrying Nachrios, these non-Jewish women. Then you've got why is there any concept of Yibum? She wasn't Jewish when her husband was alive, and then
There are a lot of situations, even modern day, where you have a conversion that's not really recognized, but it's a conversion.
So let's see.
Like in
That's
other words, the Russians.
okay. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see. There might be. So let's see. Let's see. You're on the road. You're on the road to what the Bach is going to suggest here. In other words, you're saying it can't just be black and white. There's got to be some middle road almost. That's what you're suggesting. There's a third option. Right. I'm looking at this as a binary. It's either they were either a Goya, she was Nachriya, she was non-Jewish, or she had already converted. In which case, we got this massive conundrum. You're suggesting there's a middle path where it's like. So let's see where it goes. Good, you're on the right track here. So he says, if so, why was there a need to perform Yibum? Fine. Okay, let's look at the next paragraph. Bach, in his commentary to Rus called Meshiv Nefesh, explains based on the remarks of Rambam. When he's talking about Gerus, he says as follows: that in the days of King David and Shlomo, the Batei Dinim, the Jewish courts, did not accept Gerim. Why? In David's days, there was a concern that converts would join out of fear of his great military power, meaning we couldn't really say that they were sincere in the days of David. Since he was an incredibly victorious military leader, maybe they were just converting, not because they want to join Am Yisrael and Torah and mitzvahs, but because they're scared of David HaMelech. And in Shlomo's time, Shlomo wasn't a military man, but in Shlomo's time, there was a concern that the Gentiles would be attracted by the prosperity and tranquility of the Jewish nation. So meaning they really weren't sincere. So the Grand Beis Din, the main Batei Din, the Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, in the days of David HaMelech and in the days of Shlomo did not accept Gerim. That does not mean that all doors were shut. Nonetheless, there were some informal courts that still accepted converts on a trial basis. If the Gerim would prove their loyalty and sincerity to Judaism, their conversion would be accepted retroactively. If not, it would be invalidated. So Rambam offers us, it's not a binary. There's a third option there. Even at the time of David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech, when they had a rule, no Gerim, no converts, there still were other courts that were comprised of, they were legit courts, but it wasn't immediate acceptance into Am Yisrael. It depended, there had to be a proven record of loyalty. If there was a proven, it doesn't say for how long, but if there was a proven record of loyalty, then it means when they converted, they were legit. If they somehow stepped out of line and they show there's no loyalty, this was never sincere, then we can say retroactively this Gerus was no good. Let's see what he does with this, what the Bach does with this. So let's next page, we're on page 4. Bach says that this may explain the conversions of Rus and Orpah. When they originally converted, their gerus was questionable, as it may have been motivated by their desire to marry the sons of the rich and distinguished Elimelech. In other words, when they converted, it could be that, and it could be that they invited a Beis Din to come out to Moab, where we are. In other words, Elimelech left Israel. He's living in Moab with his family, and he wants his kids to marry some girls. He finds these two girls that seem to be really nice and sincere. They want to join the Jewish people. The high courts aren't taking anybody, but I invited 3 Rabbanim out. We'll do a conversion now during this time. So he says, when they originally converted, their gerus was questionable, as it may have been motivated by their desire to marry the sons of the rich and distinguished Elimelech. When Elimelech and then Machlon and Chilion, I don't know why he wrote Chilion, it was Chilion with a chaf, died, their conversion was put to the supreme test. Would they abandon their new religion now that the motivating factors had disappeared, or would they show their loyalty to Judaism by returning with Nami? When Nami discouraged them from returning with her, Arpa departed while Rus clung to her, thereby displaying that her earlier conversion had been sincere. So basically, what's happening, what the Bach is doing, the Bach is taking this concept that Rambam said. Rambam said that there was three options in the days of David and Shlomo, David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech. There was yes, the ultimate conversion was through Sanhedrin, but they closed that door, and there was remaining non-Jewish. But there was a middle road where it could have been done by Beis Din, but not so fast. We're waiting to see. There's got to be a certain amount of loyalty that's shown before this person is accepted. If they display that loyalty, they'll be allowed in. If not, then retroactively no good. Could be, the Bach suggests, the same thing happened in the time of Elimelech, Machlon, and Chilion. They were such chashuvim, they were so important that the Beis Din that converted Arpa and Rus said, we can't give you a stamp of approval saying right now, absolutely, all doors are open. Because maybe this was just because you wanted to marry into this very prestigious family. So it was always kind of hanging in the balance. When they died, now this is time when it comes to the loyalty test. This is what Nami now is saying to them. What do you want to do? The choice is yours. And Rus shows her colors and says, Amech Ami, your people is my people. Where Kasher Talin Alim, wherever you sleep, that's where I'm going to sleep. She plants her flag with the Jewish people. That's shown to be legit. Arpa, however, says, nah, I'm going back. That shows that her initial intentions from the get-go was never to be loyal to Am Yisrael in the first place, but rather she wanted in on this prestigious family, so that conversion was no good. So it's not, this can answer everything. This answers, go back to the questions. How could it be that Elimelech and Nami allowed this family of Chashuvim allowed their sons to marry Nachrios, to marry non-Jewish women? No, they went through a conversion, but that was a conversion that was going to have to, we would never be able to paskin on their status until they passed the loyalty test. Why would there be any concept of Yibum? Because in the event they were loyal, that means she was married to, a Jewish woman was married to this fellow at the time that this Yavam or the levirate marriage potential person was alive. What about the concept of discouraging? How if she was already converted, how could she discourage Arpa? Because this was the loyalty test to see what happens, and it comes out in retroactive. She was not Jewish. What about the fact? How do we learn so many of the Dinei Gerus from this? Because again, this is how she's asking her to prove her loyalty. This suggestion of the Bach could solve this incredible conundrum over here. So again, I was really happy to see this because Rav Pam simplified it. The Bach, as I have it in the Sefer at home, is very long over several pieces, and I never really was able to follow how he was going to deal with this problem. Rav Pam pulled out the essence of it and did that. So I thought that was just a very good approach to have for all of us as we read Megillas Rus. I don't know if this has bothered you before, but it's definitely bothered me in many years when I've read it. Let's just see something here that I thought was very, very nice. Now that he said this idea that there was times when the Rambam says there were times that Gerim will not be accepted, like in the days of David, because we're nervous that it was out of fear, or Shlomo, prosperity. So look at this beautiful story he brings down. He says here, Rus is a quintessential example of a righteous convert to Judaism. The Gemara says that Gerim will not be accepted in the Messianic era. Again, just like in the days of David and Shlomo, because when things are going so good for Am Yisrael, we don't know that it's legit. So he says, Gerim will not be accepted in the Messianic era. This is because it's feared Gentiles will desire to join Klal Yisrael in order to benefit from the great success and honor Jews will achieve at that time. Old Williamsburgers, he's talking about Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So he says, will remember the famous Ger Tzedek. I tried looking up information on this person. I couldn't find anything. Rav Avram Abramson, a former priest who converted to Judaism. Again, this would have been very unusual because this is, you'll see the context here. This was Rav Shlomo Hyman. This is in the like, Rav Shlomo Hyman was in Torah Vodaas from the 30s till the, till like the early 50s, maybe a very, very short amount of time. So he says he married and raised a family of exemplary B'nai Torah. He was a Talmud Chacham and would often attend the Shurim of Rav Shlomo Hyman, who served as Rosh Hashiva Torah Das from the mid-30s until his untimely death in 44. So in other words, this Ger Tzedek, there wasn't tons of people joining.
Heavy anti-Semitism.
Correct.
In the United States.
Correct. And converting to Orthodox Judaism and becoming a Talmud Chacham. This is I tried to look up on it. I couldn't find anything. So he says this man would go to and he must have understood Yiddish because Rav Shlomo Hyman didn't speak English. So this man obviously became very educated. So he said he would go to his shir. When Rav Shlomo taught the Sugya, Talmudic topic in Yevamos about accepting converts in the Messianic era, he turned to Rav Avram with the cherubic warm smile he was famous for, and he said, Rav Avram, du hast Arain gechapt. Rav Avram, you converted just in time before it was too late. And as he's saying, I hear Mashiach's footsteps. You're so lucky, Avram, that you got in now, because in another little bit, when Mashiach comes, you won't be able to. You're so you chapped it now. So I thought this relates even to the first Divrei Torah that we saw. The first Divrei Torah was all about chapping mitzvahs and making sure to grab them. And here was Rav Shlomo Hyman joking with this righteous convert, Rav Avram Abramson, saying to him that, look what you did. You chapped it. You got in that shopping spree. It's a good thing you got it now, because pretty soon Mashiach's going to be here, and he wouldn't have been able to get in the way you did. So I thought that was just a very nice bridge to the subject. But I really like the second Dvar Torah because it helps us answer a conundrum that comes up about Rus in this era. So look, with this, I want to wish everyone not just a good day, but I want to wish everyone a wonderful Shavuos. It should be a time of Kabbalah Satorah, that we should accept back on ourselves our willingness and our eagerness to live a life of Torah mitzvahs, fulfill mitzvahs, and God willing, we should learn from these examples that we also want to we want to take the opportunity to take hold of as many mitzvahs as we possibly can. All right, have a great day, everyone.